I saw my daughter secretly demolish the custom cabin I spent years building. The dumpster was the first thing I saw. Rust orange, 30 yards long, dropped crooked across the gravel turnaround I'd graded myself with my own tractor 4 summers back. Behind it, an excavator with its bucket already resting against the porch steps. A man in a safety vest stood by the tailgate of a white pickup, with Solberg Construction Services stenciled on the door, holding a clipboard like it was something that could stop me. It was 8:40 on a Tuesday morning, the second week of November, cold enough that the mud in the ruts had gone hard overnight. "Can I help you?" he said, in the voice of a man used to homeowners showing up mad about noise. "I built this place," I told him. "Every timber of it." "What exactly is happening here?" He glanced at his clipboard, unbothered. "Demo. Full clearance on the structure, starting with the porch and working back to the frame. We've got till end of week." He turned it so I could see it. A county-stamped clearance form with a signature at the bottom I'd have known blind, because I watched that hand learn its own name in cursive at our kitchen table on Cascade Drive 30 years ago. Jenna Hensley Cole, my daughter. I stood there a second, looking past him at the cabin. My cabin. Her cabin. 2 men were already up on stepladders working a pry bar under the porch railing I'd hand-planned myself, prying loose the balusters one at a time and tossing them into a growing pile. I got my phone out and called her right there in the driveway, breath fogging, boots sinking half an inch into the frozen mud. She picked up on the third ring. "Dad. Hey, I was actually going to call you this week. I'm standing in your driveway, Jenna. There's a demo crew here and your signature on a clearance form." Silence for a beat. Then, quieter than I expected. "It's my land, Dad. It's my house now. I get to decide. But that's not where this starts. Let me take you back 4 years, to the day I cut the first beam. If this happened to you, if it was your work, your name, standing in that driveway, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments." I spent 41 years framing houses for other people out of a shop on Route 89 south of Livingston. Good, honest work. The kind where you can drive past a place 20 years later and still know which rafters you cut, which joints you cheated on a Friday afternoon you shouldn't have. But you don't build for yourself in that trade. You build for the client. You cash the check. You move on to the next foundation. Carol and I found the land the spring I turned 60. 11 acres off Deep Creek Road, a stand of lodgepole pine that had never once heard a chainsaw. A year-round creek loud enough you could hear it from the porch we hadn't built yet. I knew right then what I wanted to spend whatever years my hands had left on. One thing. For us. For our family. For Jenna, if I'm being honest with you. Because Carol and I already had a perfectly good house in town and no real need of another roof. 4 years, on and off, weekends, 2 full summers. One September I took off work entirely against Carol's better judgment. Full timber frame, hand-cut mortise and tenon joints, no engineered lumber except where the county code flat-out required it. I put the deed in Jenna's name in year 2. That part was Carol's idea. Something her sister's attorney had said about estate taxes and not wanting our daughter fighting a probate judge over a cabin someday after we were gone. But I kept the LLC on the permits. Hensley Timber Works, same outfit I'd run my whole career, same stamp I'd used on every job since 1994. Filed the structural permits under it myself at the Park County Building Department. Kept the engineer's letter in a fire safe at the house. That's just how I've always worked. You don't hand a half-cut frame over to somebody, even your own daughter, who doesn't know a king post from a collar tie. I never once thought that piece of paperwork would matter beyond the inspection. It just felt like good practice. Belt and suspenders. 41 years teaches you that. There's an afternoon in the 2nd October I think about more than I probably should. Cold enough my breath was fogging, same as it was in that driveway. Up on a ladder with a come-along fighting a ridge beam that didn't want to seat right. And I hear tires on gravel. Jenna's truck. She was 30 then, married 2 years to Todd. No earthly reason to drive 40 minutes up a logging road on a random Tuesday. She came up anyway. Brought a thermos of coffee and a turkey sandwich Carol had made her take. And instead of handing it up and leaving, she pulled on the spare pair of work gloves I kept in the truck bed, and climbed the ladder herself. 4 hours we worked that beam. She didn't complain once. Not about the cold. Not about the splinter she got hauling a come-along strap through her palm. When we finally got it seated and pinned, 11 feet up, the whole valley laid out below us, she sat on the ridge with her legs hanging off the edge and said, "Dad, I'm going to raise kids in this place someday." Nobody was around to hear it. She wasn't performing for anybody. She just meant it. Plain as anything. I think about that afternoon more now than I did before all this happened. By the time the cabin was finished, full frame, A river rock hearth I'd hauled the stone for myself, a loft window that looked straight down the valley to the creek. Jenna and Todd had gotten into something I didn't fully understand at the time. 3 short-term rental properties down in Bozeman, financed on adjustable rate loans right before the market turned against people like them. I found out later they were underwater about $2,800 a month combined. Once the rates reset and the bookings dried up, and too proud, or too scared, to say a word about it at Sunday dinner on Cascade Drive. What I didn't know was that a developer named Craig Solberg had been buying parcels along the Deep Creek Ridge for 2 years. Cash offers, no contingencies, but only for raw land. He told Jenna flat out, over coffee at the Loft on Main in downtown Livingston, tear down the structure, and he'd close at $340,000 for the 11 acres inside 60 days. Leave the cabin standing, and he wasn't interested at any price, because a custom timber frame like that would complicate his subdivision plat and scare off buyers looking for a blank slate. I found all that out afterward, piece by piece. At the time, all I knew was that Jenna had gone quiet for a few months, stopped answering texts about maybe coming up for Thanksgiving at the cabin, started saying she was swamped with work, stopped mentioning the cabin at all, which in hindsight was the loudest signal there was. She and Todd sat at their own kitchen table on a Sunday night in September, the night she actually signed Solberg's letter of intent. I only know the specifics because Todd told Carol about it weeks later, once the whole thing had already come apart, how Jenna looked at the number on the page, looked at him and said, "He'll never even drive up there to check on it himself. Dad hasn't been past Labor Day. We move fast, we're done before Christmas, and this whole mess just disappears." Todd, for what it's worth, wasn't fully on board. He told Carol he'd asked her twice if they should just talk to us instead, that his own father would have taken his head off for even considering it, cabin or no cabin. Jenna told him her father would never sign off fast enough to save them, and there wasn't time to wait and find out. She scheduled the demo crew for the second week of November, paid Solberg's demolition contractor a mobilization deposit of $6,200, filed the site clearance paperwork with Park County under her own name as title holder, because as far as the county's ownership records showed, it was hers to file. What she didn't account for, what she'd genuinely forgotten, 4 years on, was that structural demolition permits in Park County require a signed release from the engineer of record before the county issues final clearance on anything load-bearing. Hensley Timberworks was still listed as engineer of record on that cabin. The clerk who processed her application, a woman named Diane Fetzer who I'd dealt with on a dozen jobs over the years, told me later she'd almost caught it at intake, flagged the LLC name, meant to call the number on file. But the office was short-staffed that week covering for someone out on leave, and the file went through on a Friday afternoon without the callback ever getting made. For 11 days, nobody caught it at all. That's where Ray Odom comes into it. Ray ran my crew for 22 years before I finally talked him into slowing down. He's 67 now, still can't sit still, still does grading and clearing work up and down that valley for extra money and something to occupy his hands. He was clearing deadfall off the Deep Creek access road for a neighbor that same week when he noticed the dumpster and a permit stapled to the fence post out front. Ray knows my stamp when he sees it. 22 years will do that. He called me that same afternoon, a Monday. "Walt," he said, "either you're building something up there I don't know about, or somebody's fixing to tear down the nicest frame you ever cut in your life." I drove up first thing the next morning. "That's the driveway I told you about." "It's my land, Dad. It's my house now. I get to decide," Jenna said again, once I'd walked far enough down the drive that the crew couldn't hear. "You don't, though," I said. "Not on this. Not without a signed release from Hensley Timberworks, and I'm not giving you one." Her voice cracked somewhere between anger and something closer to fear. "You can't just stop this, Dad. I already told the foreman to start on the porch. He can pull porch balusters all day if it makes him feel useful," I said. "He can't touch a single load-bearing timber without my signature on file with the county. And he knows it now, because I just told him myself, standing right here." I looked over at the foreman, who'd already stopped his 2 guys on the ladder and was reading the clearance form again, slower this time, like he was seeing something in it for the first time. An hour later, Jenna's own truck pulled up the drive. She got out in her work coat, the same one she'd worn the day we set that ridge beam, and for a second neither of us said anything at all. Just stood there in the cold, with the half-stripped porch behind her. "Dad, please," she said finally. "We owe Solberg a deposit refund penalty if this deal falls through. We owe the demo company a mobilization fee whether they finish the job or not. We're already—" She stopped herself. "You're already in over your head," I said. I've known that for months, Jenna. I just didn't know how far over. You could have told me. Instead, you tried to erase 4 years of my life off this mountain so I'd never find out at all. She was crying by then, standing there in front of the cabin she'd once climbed a ladder in freezing wind to help me build. For a second, I nearly softened. Nearly. I'm not signing the release, I told her. And I'm calling the bank this afternoon about the mortgage assistance your mother and I have been quietly covering on your rentals for the last year and a half. That stops too, starting this month. Dad, that's almost $40,000 a year. We can't survive without. I built you a home with my own 2 hands, Jenna. You tried to sell the ground it stood on for $340,000 without telling either of us it was even for sale. I think we're square. The demo crew packed up that afternoon, porch railing half torn off, dumpster still sitting crooked in my turnaround where it stayed for another 2 weeks before anyone came to haul it. Solberg's company pulled the offer within 10 days once word got back to him that the structural release wasn't coming. He had 3 other clean parcels up the same ridge and no interest in one with a legal cloud hanging over it. Jenna was left holding the $6,200 mobilization deposit, non-refundable, plus a $4,100 breach of contract cancellation fee the demolition company charged for stopping mid-mobilization. $10,300 for a job that never got past the porch railing. We didn't sue her, didn't need to. Carol and I simply stopped the mortgage assistance and stopped pretending we hadn't noticed the trouble our daughter and son-in-law were in, and let the 2 of them sit with the actual math of their situation instead of one more quiet bailout papering over it. It's been 5 months now. Jenna calls more than she used to, oddly enough. Smaller calls, real ones, not the managed kind she used to make. 2 weeks ago she drove up on a Saturday by herself, no warning, same as that October years back. I was up on a ladder again, this time just replacing the balusters the crew had pried loose. She stood at the bottom holding the level for me without being asked. I want to pay you back for the porch, she said. The parts we damaged, not the whole thing, just what we broke. We'll talk about it, I told her, which was as close as I could get, that day, to something warmer. She stayed 3 hours, held the level, handed up screws, didn't bring up Solberg once. I drove up again alone, the following week, at dusk, just to stand out front of it a while. The frame stands exactly the way I cut it 4 years ago. Nobody ever got close enough to touch a single timber. Half the railing's back on now. The dumpster's long gone. I stood there a long time with my hand on the ridge post Jenna herself helped set, trying to decide whether I was looking at something that had been broken, or something that had just been tested and held. I think, in the end, it's the second one. I haven't told her that yet, but I will.